And of course, the chair of the Isli Business Members Community is here with John Allen Namo, who's going to be discussing that and winning the war on terror, winning the hearts and minds, so that we have and speak with one voice on this matter. Let me just read you one tweet. At Nick Tirop says, Christian or Muslim, we are all capable of firing an AK-47 rifle, but that is not the solution to issues. We need to uphold virtues. And so John Allen is here with his panel to talk about how we move this fight forward. Muslim, Christian, black, white, yellow, making it all inclusive. John?
Most definitely, Yvonne. A difficult discussion, especially in light of what happened on Thursday with the deaths of those 147 innocent Kenyans at the hands of the Al-Shabaab. And here to discuss this with me are two people who have quite a history with Garissa themselves, having been high school mates in Garissa High School. Ahmed Nadir Omar, a politician from Garissa, as well as Ahmed Mohammed, chairman of the Isli Business Association, business community, beg your pardon. And the story preceding our discussion is a great way to start this conversation in terms of whether the Muslim community, the Kenyan Muslim community, has faith in SUPKEM, in the CIPK, in all of the organizations which are meant to lead Muslims religiously and perhaps even provide a counter-narrative. Let me start with you, Ahmed Nadir.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, we wish to condole with the parents, relatives and friends of all the victims of the very sad massacre that happened in Garissa, and we strongly condemn in the strongest terms possible. It's an evil act that does not represent the Muslims, does not represent Islam, does not represent what the people of Garissa, the good people of Garissa, stand for. And we stand with the victims at this time, at this point in time. Now, coming to your point about the organizations and their representation, I think we need to look at this matter beyond certain organizations that people do not actually identify with and do not see as furthering the cause of bringing out what Islam is all about. As it is now, the biggest problem that we are facing, and it's a reality that every person has to deal with, is the fact that Islam as a religion has been hijacked. The true meaning of Islam, what Muslims are supposed to stand for, has been hijacked by people who have very devilish notions, satanic ideas. Call them terrorists, call them Al-Shabaab, whatever name that you call them. They are criminals, they do not represent Islam, but who is it to come up and clear this?
That's exactly what I'm asking, because SUPKEM, NAMLEF, CIPK, Council of Imams, those are the institutions that in the past Kenyan Muslims looked to for that sort of guidance and to provide that counter-narrative, because right now the narrative is being provided by Al-Shabaab and there seems to be no response. Let me get Ahmed into this. What do you think that this narrative is being countered well enough by Muslim leaders right now?
Thank you very much. First of all, like Ahmed has said, I want to send our deepest condolences on behalf of Isli residents and businesses to the victims and friends and relatives of the victims of Garissa attack. It was a heinous act, barbaric attack, and those guys were not doing all those things in our name. And as coming back to your question, these organizations that you have named have done brilliant jobs in the past. They are leading the discourse towards leading a better citizenry in this country, and they have done fantastic work. But the Al-Shabaab attack in Garissa, in Mandera, in Peketoni, and so on, do not represent Islam. And if I may take this opportunity to take you back to Somalia, for example, the Al-Shabaab militia kills and murders Muslims and Somalis every day. In fact, in the place of prayers, in mosques. And when they come back on this side of the border, they do kill our Christian brothers. And therefore, they want to create a wedge between Muslims and Christians.
A wedge that doesn't exist in reality, given their actions. But to the counter-narrative, you see, if they continue to spin a narrative that is not countered, then a lot of people who are not part of the Muslim community, as is the case now, will start to believe that. Again, who is supposed to provide this counter narrative? You were on the streets of Garissa today leading this demonstration. Some of the pictures on our Super Bowl represent this. And the messages coming out are very positive, that terrorism is evil. And that's one way. So as a community, you're leading this. But religiously, because Al-Shabaab deigns to say that they're using Islam to propagate their message and give their reasons for this, who is supposed to give that feedback, that counter from a religious point of view, and are they doing that?
It takes collective people, everyone. It takes everyone to do the counter narratives. And narratives, as you know, John, are not necessarily the facts. The fact is Islam is a religion of peace. That has become a cliche now. But what we need to do as a community, the question needs to be: are the Muslim community doing enough to counter this terrorism or terror-related incidents that's happening? Are they doing? Mostly they are. But it also goes back to the government and authorities in terms of intelligence gathering and so on and so forth. Sometimes the way the government is doing the operation exacerbates the very thing that we are fighting, which is radicalization.
Let me pick up from there and bring you back into this conversation, Ahmed Nadir. Would the average Kenyan Somali or the average Muslim go and volunteer information to the police if they had information about a terror attack, as things stand today?
Well, in the real sense, that's what should be happening. That's what should be happening, cooperating with the police, being friendly with the police. But the kind of scenario that is created, honestly speaking, and the kind of environment that has been created, and this is something that goes back to history. I mean, northern Kenya is an area that has gone through a lot of dark days in the past. There was the shift war and all that. And then, I mean, because the people were, it was a political war, people were fighting for succession and all that. Whoever was fighting for the succession was hiding among the people who don't volunteer information. Now we are in a situation where you may see that maybe the security agencies, for one reason or the other, are trying to fight the terrorism more in the same way that the shifter war was fought. And there was always that misconception, there was always that perception that the people are hiding. Would hide the terrorists and all that. And on the other end, the people are feeling that, well, we want to volunteer information. This is also damaging us.
Yeah.
We are not also safe. We are not also living in safe havens. This is damaging in our reputation.
Okay.
For heaven's sake, I do not want to be walking the streets and when someone looks at me, he sees I'm seeing a bomb. You know, so people are actually awake to the fact that they should be volunteering and information, but it has to be two-way. That friendliness has to be created, and I think we need to come with elaborate community policing measures that will always assure that whoever volunteers information, one, is very safe from being persecuted, or I mean that information is held in confidentiality, and two, simply because I volunteered, for instance, someone volunteered an information on his relative and having a connection with the terrorism or Al-Shabaab for that matter, does not mean that the person himself is a criminal or the entire family or the entire relatives are also criminals. With this kind of assurances, I'm very sure people will always be very much willing. But at this point in time, the situation that is there is that people are feeling that they are being pressed between a rock and a hard place. Here are Al-Shabaab beating us indiscriminately and damaging us directly and indirectly in any way, and making us lose the will to live. And here is the government also seeing you as a criminal or a potential criminal and holding you as guilty until proving innocent.
Let's just put that on pause for a moment and just get a soundbite from President Uhuru Kenyatta in his address to the public today on the same subject about radicalization and also about perhaps the role of the Muslim community in being able to fight this.
The radicalization that breeds terrorism is not conducted in the bush at night. It occurs in the full glare of day, in homes, in madrasas, and in mosques with rogue imams. We must ask the question, where are the parents and families of those who are being radicalized? Where is the community leadership? Where is the political leadership? Where is the religious leadership? The government must get the information and cooperation of all these parties if we are to effectively combat the terrorists. It is a fact that our task of countering terrorism work has been made all the more difficult by the fact that the planners and financiers of this brutality are deeply embedded in our communities and were seen previously as ordinary, harmless people. We will not allow them to continue their lives as normal.
Well, the president making a very direct statement about where he thinks and where perhaps intelligence believes that the Al-Shabaab are hiding within the community. Ahmed, in Eastleigh, a number of these operations have been conducted as late as perhaps even 2 weeks ago, trying, at least from the government's point of view, trying to weed out these people. Does the Al-Shabaab have cooperation, the cooperation of, for instance, the Kenyan Somali community and also wider the Muslim community?
First of all, I would like to agree with the president. He made a very good point. And the point is, someone somewhere must know something. How do we get that information is where the problem is. And in terms of, for example, Eastleigh, you have asked. Eastleigh is largely inhabited by Somali community. And it's one of the places that people suspect there might be a sleeper cell of Al-Shabaab operatives. But the thing that I have to tell you is, as we speak, there's no strong community police in Eastleigh. And once you volunteer information, you don't know where it will end up. And that's why the president already last week took the initiative in fighting corruption. I think corruption is the main scourge that exacerbates radicalization. And radicalization, as you may know, is someone somewhere saying no to the status quo. Maybe for commercial reasons or political reasons or religious reasons. It's someone saying no to the status quo. I don't want to live as things stand. And we need to actually be inclusive. The government needs to be inclusive in fighting corruption which leads to terrorism. And they can start with, for example, there was an initiative called Nyumba Kumi. I don't know where it has ended to. You don't
feel like it's part of the Eastleigh community?
I don't feel like it.
All right, Ahmed Nadir, in Garissa, the same questions are being asked, especially in the wake of this attack. Information coming out is that perhaps some of the people who perpetrated this attack slipped in acting as students with the help of some students in that community. Do you feel that this is a fair assessment, that the community helped these terrorists get into Kenya? Just living in Garissa yourself and experiencing that sort of dilemma between the Al-Shabaab and the government's response.
To be honest and to be fair with in all this matter, it's a very fairly complicated and a very complex matter as it is, and you do not actually know, you cannot actually blame one section of the stakeholders in the whole thing per se, but you cannot rule out the involvement in the community either directly or indirectly in the perpetration of these issues.
What
and when I'm
talking
about
indirectly,
when I'm talking about indirectly, is that well, maybe there are instances where there are acts of omissions by the community, and you ask yourself, where is this omission coming from? We need to interrogate that. We need to actually question that, and that's the point that it goes back to the point that I was earlier on raising on. Do the people have confidence in the security agencies in two ways? Do they have confidence in such a matter that they will treat this matter confidently and do not see them as criminals themselves? And will this matter not come to harm them again, and the information end up with Al-Shabaab or the terrorists?
All right.
So this is a matter that needs to be interrogated, I think, holistically.
All right. In terms of that interrogation, we'll continue with that discussion in a moment. But let's try and analyze what happened in Garissa and the terror issues that have been happening in this country. Now, the differences in the approaches to the Westgate and the Garissa campus attacks will continue to emerge as details of what went down there are revealed. But one question already being asked is why the government saw it fit to send in the cabinet secretary in a chopper first and then later transport the wrecker squad by road to deal with the terrorists. KTN Samogena takes a look at what we know so far.
3 out of the 5 suspects in police custody are believed to have coordinated the Garissa College attack and aided the mastermind in the planning and the execution of the siege. The 3 were arrested while fleeing to Somalia. Police have issued a 20 million bounty on a former teacher in Garissa, Kuna Mohammed, who it is believed is the key mastermind of the college attack. 2 other suspects were arrested within the university premises. One is claimed to be of a Tanzanian nationality, named as Rashid Charles Mberesero. The suspect reportedly was hiding in the ceiling, clutching on grenades. The second suspect is said to be the institution's guard. Osman Ali Dagane is said to be Kenyan of Somali origin. Police say the guard facilitated the attackers, giving information about the institution to the gang. He is said to have been in possession of jihadist literature at the time of his arrest. Nonetheless, questions are emerging on the rescue efforts coordination between the military, Kenya Police and the elite General Service Unit Reke Company. There are concerns that strategic rescue plan and command would have saved more lives and reduced the death toll witnessed. While the military cordoned off the area using its tanks as decoys, engaging the militants, another group of terrorists were busy executing innocent students at the campus. In all this, Kenya's elite squad Reke Company was on the road from Nairobi to Garissa. A unit trained specifically to deal with close quarter battle or foiling hostage situations. Begging the question, would it have made sense to fly the team from Nairobi to Garissa instead of ferrying them by road? Would it have made any difference in the death toll of the students murdered? Is the military best placed in fighting hostage takeover? Sources say the Reke Company, upon their arrival on the scene, ended the siege in a very short time, neutralizing all the attackers that had held back the police and the military for hours. Would it have been prudent then to use the chopper that flew the Interior Cabinet Secretary and the Inspector General of Police to fly the team that spent the least amount of time to eliminate the enemy? Or is the country still grappling with command structure issues and consequently committing more lives to the enemy? Samugina, KTN.
What are very disturbing details that seem to be emerging about the way the Reke squad was transported to Garissa and the time that it took to be able to get to that scene and what happened next. Those are things that we're going to be asking the government questions all over in coming days with respect to perhaps whether it did affect the death toll. Now let's just get back to this discussion and the story itself. Seeing that perhaps there was some bungling of information that would lead to the Reke squad getting there so late. What do you make of that as a resident of Garissa in terms of the government response?
Well, we have not yet received the official government response to this issue, and I think in the face of the issue, the very complex issue that was happening there, the hostage situation, we need to hail the government. We need to hail our gallant soldiers. I think they did an amazing job, and that is all that was within their powers in the face of the situation that was there. Because there are so many details that we are not privy to at this point in time. Because we know that these gunmen accessed the hostels. We do not know how long it took them to carry on their devilish massacre there. So probably even if the Reke squad was there even by as early as 10, you never know whether they will have saved anything. So we are not privy to a lot of information, and it is at this in these kind of situations, it's always good to have that trust and confidence in the government and rely on the official government position
until the facts themselves
emerge.
Facts
are established. Yes.
Now, another story that another issue that was raised in that story that we've just seen by Samugina was perhaps the help that was received from the terrorists by people who are either guarding the establishment, but in the wider context of what's happening, the picture that's on our super right now of Mohammed Kuno, a person who taught in Garissa according to the government, a person who perhaps, according to what we're seeing, and these haven't been established yet, might have either relatives or relations in Garissa County. His story itself plays into what a lot of people would anecdotally call that assistance that terrorists may be receiving from the local community. Now, I know we've spoken about this before, but how is it that you'll be able to extract, excluding even the government, how is it that the community itself would be able to start speaking out about these issues and ensuring that people like Kuno, people like other terrorists that perhaps have infiltrated the community, do not get the chance to use the community as a shield? Start with you.
Well, yes, one issue that we need to face, and it's a reality that we cannot just, bury our heads in the sand, is that radicalization is an issue that is there, is an issue that is on, and is an ongoing, and it's an ideology. What we're actually dealing with now are not individuals. What we are dealing with now is some kind of an ideology. And if you have been trying to look at the trend of these people, the kind of people that they have been enrolling into their groups, young people who, most of them probably have lost hopes in life, and who can be easily brainwashed. And I think a lot, as I said earlier on in my opening remark, a lot needs to be done by the community in every sense. And I repeat again, we are facing a situation where the real and the true meaning of Islam has been hijacked. And the only people who can salvage that, and the only people who can redeem and rehabilitate this image, is the Muslims themselves.
Yeah.
They should not leave it to other persons. And when we leave it to people who have, as I always put it, satanic ideologies to represent them and to act on behalf of them, it will always prove that misconception that is there, that we, after all, we are one, and we are part of them.
True. Ahmed, you were on the streets, like we had spoken about earlier today, talking about terrorism being evil, and terrorism and the Islam that the Al-Shabaab profess not being Islam at all. That's one community response. But how is it that we can get other Kenyans who are not Muslim, Kenyans who are perhaps are not even Somali and don't know what it's like to experience what Somalis have been going through in Isli, to get on board and speak with one voice with respect to that from a community perspective, because you work with the community on a daily basis?
What I did today, the demonstration you saw on the streets of Isli today, we had multi-faith groups there. I had a reverend, a pastor, an imam, a community leader, a business leader, and normal residents and business people in Isli come together to fight terror and condemn the attacks in Garissa. But what this point comes back to is to look at the psychoanalysis of who actually a terrorist is. Like you said, the person whose picture is on the screen is someone who was respected as a teacher, as a very someone looked up to. But you never know who these people are. For example, in Somalia, some of the ministers and leaders in Somalia who became victims of terrorists were victims of their own relatives. Someone was murdered by his own daughter, for example, in Somalia. So what we need to do is to take a step back. Right now, it's very hard to talk about the analysis of terrorism when we have 147 families mourning. So what you need to do is to take a somber approach into these issues, take a step back and look forward as a nation, come together as one, and involve the residents and the communities. For example, in Isli, we need to have a proper police station with checks and balances, with a strong community policing, which we don't have at the moment.
True.
We need to have people who are trusted with information.
All right. Ahmed Nadir, speaking about the burden of terrorism as we wind up, Garissa County has had the highest burden in terms of terrorism. 32% of the attacks since 2011 took place in Garissa County. A lot of them took place and were perpetrated against people who, in colloquial terms, came from down Kenya, right? Yeah. Now, granted the scale of this attack is unimaginable, but it feels, at least I've seen a lot of sentiment about this before, that the response by Muslims in Garissa itself was very muted to those kinds of attacks. Why has this been the case? Is it that the media has ignored these voices, or that people just haven't spoken out?
Honestly speaking, there's a role that every sector of the society is supposed to play, and there's a role that, a very important role that the fourth estate is supposed to be playing. And I think this is a matter that we actually discussed while KTM was in Garissa, the other Kenya, on the other Kenya program. That I think there was, whether it was a deliberate or, I mean, we do not actually understand the policy of each and every media house. There was some kind of a blackout by the media on the activities that the people there may be undertaking in trying to fight terrorism, number one. Number two, we need to have some kind of an integrated solution that involves every person, and every person knows his role and her role. But for example, the institutions that represent the Muslims, the individuals themselves, the sheikhs. I mean, not every person subscribes to these ideologies. It is very few, and it's a very negligible and insignificant percentage. So we need to have all those people on board, and with a very clear and defined role. Each and every one of them plays a role, and then that is some kind of supervised and monitored by the government.
Yeah.
Think through that now. Will be in a position to face this issue. One other thing that we also have to understand is that these acts of terror that have been happening in Garissa, as you are saying, were targeting most of the victims. Unfortunately, ended up being people from down Kenya. One thing that I'm very sure and I'm very positive is that had there been no single person who is a non-Somali in Garissa, still maybe Al-Shabaab would have attacked Garissa because they find it a soft spot for Kenya because of some security lapses here and there. And then they will have found another reason for doing that. They will have justified it and said, oh, maybe this is an occupied land by an infidel or by a government that has is an infidel or something.
Yeah.
So the issue is actually beyond the people who are targeted. This is just some kind of justification that they always come up with. If you see at the kind of messages that they circulate. But the most important issue is how to face and how to actually sensitize people to wake up to what their roles is, and also appreciate their roles. And most importantly, and very key, seeing people as judging people as innocent and peace-loving people themselves, unless otherwise proved otherwise.
All right. All right, thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, this is where we're going to have to wind up, but I'll give you the last comment about corruption. Now, the Eastleigh business community has felt this quite strenuously over a number of operations that have taken place. But the corruption is the role of the, or rather how corruption works is that there's a giver and a receiver, right? What has been your thought? What have been your thoughts on the givers themselves? How do you stop that cycle? Do you think that people, if faced with the kind of threats that they've been faced with in Eastleigh, can actually stand up and say no, and what would the consequences be?
Before I come to that, I would like to take a few seconds to actually congratulate our security forces for the commendable job that they have done. Lives have been lost, but they have also rescued a lot of people. I would also like to congratulate our leaders, local leaders, for example, the leader of the majority and the county governor, for the response that they have given to the people who are affected. Coming back to the corruption issue, like you said, there's a taker and there's also a giver.
Yeah.
And we also we always tell our community in Eastleigh, if there's a problem with the police, do not give out bribes. If there's anything, you'll only go to the police station. You'll be charged with whatever you did. If there's nothing, you'll be released.
All right.
But that's not the reality on the ground. When a police officer in Eastleigh arrests you, probably take you around Eastleigh for a few trips, and then while you're tired, you just want to pat out with a few hundred bobs. So it's something that the government needs to make it its own official assignment for the next few weeks and months, so that we can weed out corruption, and as a result, weed out terrorism and any other scourge that's affecting our country at the moment.
All right, Ahmed Mohammed, thank you very much for joining us this evening from the Eastleigh residents and business community, as well as you, Ahmed Adil Mohammed, politician from Garissa. Hope to engage more on this issue, on de-radicalization and being able to win the fight from a community perspective, but also something that would include the government and other stakeholders. But the point to these kinds of discussions, the points to these kinds of discussions are often very wide and very variety and very diverse in respect to finding solutions to this. But Yvonne Okwara has been following this discussion and now gives us some of the key points that we should take home from this discussion. Yvonne.
So what is the point of our discussion tonight? Well, one is that the war on terror needs to be all-inclusive. Now, the TJRC report talked about the marginalization of the people in the Northern Frontier District. Now, for as long as a section of Kenyans continue to feel that they are not yet Kenyan, in fact, I saw a tweet today saying it's not yet Kenyan, but rather not yet human, we will continue to have the problem of radicalization. We will continue to have the problem of what's happening in this area. And even as we mentioned, it being all-inclusive, here's an interesting question to ponder. When it was Westgate, we had an M-Pesa number. Did we have the same for Mpeketoni? Do we have the same now for those in Garissa? Perhaps we all stand indicted for not being as inclusive as we should be in the fight against terror and in making sure that everybody feels Kenyan enough. The second point we want to talk about tonight is the issue of rented terrorism. Now, here's the thing. Anybody in this country can be a member of Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab probably knows no race, no color, and if there is ever any good example to prove this, it would be El Giva Bwire, who in 2011 was sentenced to life for being a member of Al-Shabaab and, of course, for some of those activities. He claimed he was their point man in Nairobi when it came to keeping weapons. These are some of the things we must remember so that we don't isolate one community, and we must always remember that rented terrorism now is all about looking for idle youth who have no ideology to perhaps, or who have no faith to sink into. Anybody can be a member. Once we start to marginalize one community, what are we then saying, and how does that work in the fight against terror? Perhaps this goes to marginalize people more. Our final point tonight is to protect those who fight against terrorism. I want to read you a tweet tonight. Aziz Salim says, I guess Muslim leaders are afraid because whenever they come out and speak against terrorism, they are gunned down by terrorists like Idris. He's referring to Sheikh Mohammed Idris, who was at the forefront of the fight against radicalization and who was killed in June last year. More protection needs to be given to those that come out. The president said today, if you know anybody that's within your community, please do come out and talk about what's happening. But if those people are not protected, how will we ever win the war on terror? Let me conclude with a tweet from Mustafa Ali, who says, but all said, Muslim leaders and community have to step forward and lead the fight against radicalization into terrorism. That tonight is the point.